Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The door to Murphy's bar groaned open like an old wound reopening. Maya Shun stepped through with a breath so measured, so deliberate, you'd think she was defusing a bomb. In a way, she was. The scent hit her first. Stale beer, cigarette smoke, and something colder, metallic. The kind of scent that once clung to her fatigues after nights spent crawling through blood and dust. But this place wasn't a battlefield. Not officially, still. Every eye turned toward her like she'd kicked in the door with a rifle instead of slipping in under the faded neon lights. 30, maybe 40. Veterans all paused mid-conversation. Pints half raised. Laughter cut short. Just to watch her walk across the floor like she was an intruder on sacred ground. She looked young. That was part of the problem. 28. Barely 5'3", hoodie too big. Backpack hanging off one shoulder like she'd wandered in from a college campus by mistake. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the wood floor. Too loud. Everything about her felt too loud. She reached the bar. Every footstep felt like a dare. Every glance felt like a test. 100 silent questions in the stale air. What's she doing here? Who let her in? Diesel, the bartender, former Navy SEAL by the look of the tats, and Stare slid a Coke toward her without asking. First time playing with the big boys? He said, voice laced with smirking cruelty. She almost answered, almost gave him the real story. The truth about Fallujah, about Kandahar, about how she still wakes up gripping the edge of her mattress like it's a stretcher. Instead, she smiled. A tight, almost invisible smile. Took a sip. The fizz burned behind her. Big Jim, Vietnam vet, prosthetic leg, biceps like tree trunks. Nudged a wiry guy covered in tattoos. Lost, sweetheart? He called out. The laughter that followed wasn't kind. Maya didn't flinch, but her fingers curled tighter around the glass. The room returned to its conversation, slowly, like a predator retreating, but the air remained thick with suspicion. She didn't belong, not yet. There was an old woman in the back corner, graying ponytail. Cigarette burned low between two scarred fingers, eyes sharp as broken glass. You sure you're in the right place, honey? She rasped, not cruel, not kind either. I'm exactly where I need to be, Maya said. But her voice was softer than she wanted. The words caught slightly in her throat. Her hands trembled, just for a second. The Coke helped, cold against. Her skin, grounding. She'd survived worse than this. She found a seat. Ignored the way Frank Rodriguez stared at her like she was some kind of cosmic insult. 2 fingers missing, haunted eyes, still nursing his 4th beer. Next to him, Tommy Tank Morrison flexed under his nickname. His eyes narrowed. Lips curled, judgment, coiled and ready. Maya stared straight ahead. She didn't need their permission. But God, she wanted their understanding. What does it take to earn silence in a room like this? Next Thursday, she came back. Same hoodie, same Coke, same footsteps that hit the floor like questions with no answers. This time, the hostility was colder, less curious, more surgical. The room had had a week to whisper about her. She wasn't new anymore. She was the anomaly they couldn't place. Frank greeted her like a brick through glass. Thought maybe you figured out this wasn't your scene. She didn't blink. Diesel slid her drink over with that same half-smirk. But now, there was something else behind his eyes. A flicker of something, like a cat circling a mouse. Big Jim leaned in. So, what exactly did you do over there? Maya kept her gaze on the mirror behind the bar. Watched his reflection speak instead of facing him directly. I served. That ain't an answer, said Tank. His voice had the texture of gravel and bad memories. Administrative support, Maya said. Quiet. Controlled. And just like that, they laughed. Laughed like wolves. Paperwork? Someone scoffed. Probably never left the green zone. File this, file that. Tank stepped closer. Breath thick with whiskey. Was the worst injury you saw a paper cut? She didn't react. She couldn't. They were pushing her. Hard. Trying to make her break. And maybe that's when she realized. They weren't laughing because they didn't believe her. They were laughing because they were afraid of what it would mean if they were wrong. Frank leaned in. Real vets wait months for treatment. And you. His voice cracked. You're taking a spot someone else should have had. She pulled out her phone. 17 missed calls. Her therapist, Dr. Martinez. A text blinked onto the screen. Hope you're finding your tribe out there. Doc, you deserve it. She almost laughed. This was her tribe? She looked around the bar again and saw it clearly for the first time. Every eye, every smirk, every insult. It wasn't about her. It was about them. They saw their trauma like currency. And Maya was walking in with bills they didn't recognize. I'm exactly where I need to be, she said again, but this time, even she didn't quite believe it. How many times do you have to walk into fire before they stop calling it a fluke? 3 weeks later, the ambush came before she even sat down. The toy soldier was waiting, perched on her usual bar stool. Green plastic, rifle raised in salute, a folded note taped to its base. For our brave keyboard warrior, thanks for your service. To the filing cabinet. Real heroes don't need to prove anything. Fake ones can't stop trying. Silence dropped like a hammer. She read the note, folded it with careful fingers, slipped it into her pocket, moved the toy soldier aside, like it was glass, and sat down. No flinch, no retreat. Frank stood. His eyes weren't just bloodshot. They were alive with something else now. Fury, or guilt masquerading as pride. You know what really pisses me off. He shouted, pretenders like you, taking space real soldiers need. He limped forward, slow, menacing. Everyone stepped back. You sit there like you belong, coke in hand, hoodie pulled tight. While the rest of us bled, Maya's grip on the glass turned white. 0 purple hearts, right, princess? He sneered, and then something shifted in her chest. Not fear, no. Cold fury, steady and surgical. She reached into her backpack. Frank's voice wavered. Thought she was going to cry or snap or run instead. She placed a small mahogany box on the bar. Brass hinges, scratched edges, worn wood. It clicked open. Inside, 5 purple hearts. Silence fell like dust after an explosion. The first medal, Fallujah, Maya said. Voice clear. March 2018. Roadside bomb. Secondary device. Shrapnel in my back. I was treating a Marine with a collapsed lung. Second medal. Kandahar 2019. Sniper attack during evac. Bullet. Grazed my skull. Third. Field hospital, mortar fire. Lost 2 patients, saved 6. Took shrapnel to the leg. Fourth. Convoy hit. Internal bleeding. Dislocated shoulder. I kept treating wounded until the bird came. Fifth. Her voice cracked. The 5th one. She looked up, straight at Frank. That one? That was you. What happens when the man who mocked you realizes you saved his life? Frank Rodriguez swayed where he stood, as if Maya's words had cracked something fundamental in his spine. What? His voice was hoarse, fragile, not the angry bark they were used to, but the bewildered whimper of a man watching the floor disappear beneath his feet. You were unconscious, Maya said softly. Left side burned, right leg shattered. I held your artery closed with 2 fingers and talked to you for 47 minutes. While the ammo in the Humvee cooked off, Frank staggered backward like she'd struck him. His hand reached for the bar, then missed, and he collapsed into the nearest chair with a groan. His face was pale, his hands shaking. The room stood. Still, not quiet. Still, like no one dared breathe. Maya didn't gloat, didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The medals did the speaking. The memories filled in the rest. Sarah Williams. The grizzled woman from the corner rose slowly from her stool, her scarred hands clenched at her sides. 47 minutes, she said, staring down at Frank. Under fire, And this is how you repay her? No one moved. Frank's hands were covering his face now, shoulders heaving. I remember your voice, he choked. I didn't see you. The smoke. I never saw your face, but I remember your voice. Maya's fingers trembled over the box, but her face remained steady. She wasn't speaking for revenge. She wasn't doing this to win. She was just done staying silent. You kept slipping out of consciousness, she said. So I told you stories about my hometown, about my dog, about how we'd go fishing after the deployment. Frank's lips moved, forming soundless words. Tears fell through his fingers. You told me I'd make it. Maya nodded, blinking back her own tears. You did. What does it take for shame to drown out pride? Big Jim was the first to break formation. The man who'd laughed loudest that first night now removed his cap, the faded one that read Vietnam veteran, and held it to his chest like he was at a funeral, like someone had died. Maybe someone had. Maybe it was the version of themselves they'd become after too many years building walls instead of bridges. Tank Morrison's voice cracked. Jesus, Maya, He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. His silence said it all. Frank stood up slowly, face mottled with grief and disbelief. You saved me. Maya didn't nod, didn't smile. She just looked at him. I tried to destroy your reputation, he whispered. And you saved my life. You were unconscious, she said. I don't blame you for not remembering. I should have remembered something, he rasped. Anything. Sarah stepped closer, her jaw clenched. You remembered enough to humiliate. For 3 straight weeks, Frank's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. The words were tiny, like they didn't belong in his mouth. I'm so goddamn sorry, Maya. Can forgiveness live where wounds still bleed? She could have walked out then, could have left them to drown in their guilt, could have slammed the door on Murphy's and never returned. Instead, Maya closed the box slowly. The click of the brass latch felt like a church bell. Hospital corpsman. Second class, she said. 2nd Marine Division, 4 deployments. 847 casualties treated. 23 lost. She turned toward the wall of photos, the ones that lined the bar like a shrine. Desert heat, firefights, old friends in grainy Polaroids. You weren't one of them. Frank, none of you were. Her voice didn't rise. That made it hit harder. The room vibrated with silence. No one moved. No one blinked. Big Jim stepped forward. Ma'am, he said, voice thick. I want to apologize. What we did. What I did. Maya cut him off with a look. It was human. That stopped him. You forgot what it means to fight for someone, she said. Now you remember. What happens when the myth of strength meets the reality of grace? Tank stepped forward. There were rumors, he said, about a medic in Fallujah. They called her the Angel of Mercy. He looked at her, unsure. Was that you? Maya smiled. Just barely. I never liked the name, she said. I was just doing my job. Sarah walked to her, each step deliberate, like she was walking toward the truth she'd buried for years. Your job was saving lives under hellfire, she said. Your job was being the difference between someone making it home or not. She reached out and touched the mahogany box with one finger. Your job, she whispered, was being a damn hero. When does respect become reverence? Frank moved toward her again, but this time he was smaller, humbled, hands open, not reaching, just waiting. I don't deserve it, he said. But may I buy you a drink? A real one this time, not just a Coke. Maya looked around the room, and faces that had once been sharp with suspicion, now softened by shame. The same faces that had driven her to the edge were now holding on to her like a lifeline. She nodded. I'd like that, Frank. It was the smallest sentence in the world, and it changed everything. Why does truth feel like a revolution? Word spread fast, through counties, through units, through whispers across VA waiting rooms and back alley support groups, about the medic who sat quietly for 3 weeks while they mocked her. About the moment she opened the box, about the 5 purple hearts, about the 5th one, his. Frank became her loudest defender, told the story over and over like scripture. 47 minutes, he'd say, eyes glassy, while the Humvee burned, while the ammo cooked off. She kept her hand on my artery and told me about her dog. Every week he repeated it, every week. Maya came back, and every week. The room stood when she walked in. No orders given, no commands spoken. They just rose, quietly, respectfully, because something sacred had walked through the door. How does a scarred place start to heal? Murphy's Bar didn't change overnight, but the air felt different. Less like judgment, more like breath. The kind of breath you don't know you've been holding. Every Thursday, Maya showed up. Hoodie, Coke, mahogany box safely tucked away. She didn't flash medals, didn't make speeches. She just took her seat, quiet, steady, unshaken. The others followed her lead, without even realizing it. Frank, once the loudest skeptic, now became her shadow. He'd sit beside her, elbows on the bar, voice low as he whispered stories to newcomers. About Fallujah, about the burning Humvee. About 47 minutes that stretched across a lifetime. You ever seen someone hold a man together with nothing but their hands and sheer will? He'd say, that was her. And somehow, people listened. Tank Morrison stopped making jokes that cut too deep. Big Jim started offering rides home to the quiet ones. Sarah Williams, once all cigarette smoke and gritted teeth, laughed more. Not a lot, but enough, and Diesel. Even Diesel started pouring her Coke without the smirk. What does redemption taste like in a room filled with ghosts? The first time a new vet walked in, young, jittery, scanning exits with combat eyes. No one said a word, but Maya turned in her seat, raised her glass, and nodded. That was all it took. The room followed her cue. The newcomer sat down next. To her, and exhaled for the first time in weeks. Later, he said something Maya never forgot. I thought I was going to have to prove I belonged, but you just made it feel like I already did. She didn't reply, just offered a quiet smile, because she remembered the toy soldier on her bar stool, the smirks, the dismissals, the note calling her a fraud. She remembered every word, and she forgave. It quietly, dangerously, because that's how healing works, one grace at a time. What happens when the quiet one becomes the center of the storm? Word spread. People came. Not for the drinks, not even for the stories. They came for Maya, for what she represented. Not heroism in the movie sense. No explosions, no slow-motion flag waves. But the heroism of someone who'd been broken, bled, and buried by silence, and still stood up to speak. Veterans from other counties started showing up, some out of curiosity, others out of guilt. They came to see the woman with 5 purple hearts and the steady gaze. She met every one of them. With the same nod, the same Coke, the same stillness. And it was enough. When does a nickname become a badge of honor? They started calling her Doc again. At first, it was Frank, testing the word like it was foreign in his mouth. Then it spread. Tank, Big Jim, even Diesel, Doc, they'd say, sliding her a drink or asking about a scar or just needing someone to listen. It wasn't a title anymore. It was a salve, a kind of invisible rank they hadn't known they were missing. Because Maya didn't just patch wounds overseas. She patched them here too, quietly, carefully, one broken voice at a time. What happens when the medic starts saving people? At home, it wasn't just war stories anymore. It was the stuff people didn't talk about. The nightmares, the drinking, the anger that crept in at traffic lights and screamed at wives. People started telling her things, hard things, they hadn't said to a VA shrink in years, and Maya, she never interrupted, never rushed, just listened. And sometimes, that was the only medicine that mattered. How do you measure the impact of silence, broken at the right time? One night, Big Jim pulled her aside. His voice cracked in a way that no enemy ever had. My nephew, he said, I sent him to talk to you. He doesn't talk to anyone. But he called me after. Said he's going to a support group now. He looked away. First time he's admitted he needs help since Iraq. Maya just nodded. Let the weight of that moment hang in the air. You gave him permission to be broken, Jim said. That's something none of us knew how to do. What does transformation look like when no one says it out loud? Murphy's changed, not because they tore the place down, but because they built something new inside it. The jukebox still sucked. The floors still creaked, but the walls? They whispered a different story now. They'd added a photo, grainy, dusty, honest Maya, in combat gear, crouched over a wounded Marine. Blood streaked across her sleeve. Underneath, someone had scrawled, "The doc who stayed." It wasn't an award, it was a truth, a homecoming. How do you lead without ever raising your voice? She never asked for leadership, never wanted a podium, but week after week, she showed up. She listened. She laughed. A little more now. She gave advice when it was needed, and silence when it was sacred. They followed her, not because she demanded it, but because she embodied something rare. Not strength that shouted, but strength that held space. Maya had become the kind of leader who doesn't say, "Follow me." She simply walks, and people follow. How many lives can you save just by staying present? The fifth medal, the one that started it all, stayed in the box most nights now. But everyone remembered it. Frank never stopped telling the story, and every time he did, he ended the same way. She saved me, and I tried to break her, but she didn't fold. She stayed, and because she stayed, I got a second chance. And Maya? She knew something no one else said out loud, that sometimes the loudest battles are fought in quiet places, and that the greatest acts of war are the ones that bring people home. How do you carry the weight of other people's pain without it breaking you? Thursday again. Same stool, same Coke, same low hum of bar chatter and old jukebox tracks no one really listens to. But Maya could feel it before she saw it. A new presence. Someone lingering in the doorway, hesitating, like she once had. He was young, maybe 24. Shoulders too stiff for civilian life. Civilian clothes that didn't quite fit. Not yet. His eyes swept the room, cataloging faces, measuring danger, counting exits. She knew that scan. She'd done it herself, still did. He almost turned to leave, but Maya stood. Just one movement. Smooth, calm, deliberate. "Excuse me," she called gently, voice warm but steady. "Looking for someone?" The young man froze, swallowed, then turned toward her, voice like it was a lighthouse in the dark. Maybe. He didn't step in, just stood there, one foot still out the door, like he could vanish if this went wrong. "I heard there was a group that meets here," he said. "Veterans, but I'm not sure I belong." The room didn't move, but Maya did. She walked toward him, hands loose at her sides. No sudden movements, no pressure. "Name?" He hesitated then. "Marcus, Corporal Marcus Johnson, 3rd Infantry Mechanic." She nodded slowly. "Well, Marcus, I'm Maya, and I can tell you right now, you belong. What if the voice that saved others is the same voice you once needed to hear?" Marcus looked around the room, at Frank in the booth, at Tank at the pool table, at Sarah with her scars. "They're all, real soldiers." Maya tilted her head. "Didn't rush. I didn't see combat." Marcus added quickly, eyes on the floor. "Not really, no firefights, no medals. I just kept the vehicles running." The shame in his voice hit her like shrapnel, because she remembered. She remembered standing right there, in that same doorway, with that same weight on her shoulders. The lie that said pain had to be earned in blood. She reached into her memory, into the part of her that still bled quietly. 6 months ago, she said, "I stood where you're standing now." Hoodie, backpack, heart full of doubt. Marcus looked up. "I thought my service didn't count. Thought I didn't earn a place among them. But you know what I found?" He shook his head. I found that service comes in many forms, and none of them are small. Can one conversation become a turning point? She walked him toward the bar, toward the place where acceptance had once been withheld from her. And now? Now it waited like an open hand. You ever pull a night shift in a freezing motor pool just to make sure the convoy could roll at dawn? She asked. He nodded. Every week. You ever miss a meal or sleep in oil because a Humvee needed you? He smiled, small and tight. Every day. Maya returned the smile. You made sure others came home. That's service, that's sacrifice. He sat down beside her, didn't speak for a while, just let the words wrap around him like a warm blanket he hadn't known he needed. Across the room, Frank raised his glass. Welcome home, brother. When does belonging begin? The room erupted. Tank nodded from across the pool table. Sarah Williams offered a rare, genuine grin. Diesel slid a beer toward Marcus and a Coke to Maya. First drink's always on the house, he said. For family. Marcus blinked like he wasn't sure what just happened. He looked at Maya. Is this real? She nodded. It is now. How do you build a community when everyone's still bleeding somewhere inside? The hours passed. Marcus began to talk. Not much, but enough about Iraq, about the motor pool, about his quiet pride in keeping people moving, and his quiet guilt for not being in the fight. Maya listened, didn't interrupt, didn't correct until the right moment. You know, she said, some of the worst wounds don't come from bullets. They come from believing you didn't do enough. He looked at her, really looked. You believe that? She nodded. Every day. For years. And he understood. That's when it started to change. Can a scarred space become sacred? Week after week, it happened again. New faces, same fears, and Maya was always there. Not as a savior, but as proof. Proof that service wasn't a competition. The pain wasn't a currency. That healing didn't start with medals. It started with mercy. Frank started calling her Doc again, this time without apology. Big Jim built her a wooden plaque. For the one who stayed, Sarah stopped smoking. Not all at once, but it began with a promise. Tank started bringing his nephew, and Diesel? Diesel set aside a bottle of top-shelf whiskey. Doc's bottle. No one touched it unless she said so. What happens when the person who once needed saving becomes the reason others stay alive? Marcus came back every week. He stopped scanning exits, stopped flinching at laughter, started smiling more. And then one night, he stood up and told his story. Told the bar that the only reason his unit ever made it to the front lines was because he kept their wheels turning. Told them that for the first time, he believed that mattered. The applause wasn't loud. It was quiet, reverent, like a kind of prayer. And Maya? She just raised her glass. Didn't speak, because sometimes silence is the loudest kind of welcome. What does it mean to lead when no one asked you to, but everyone needs you to? It wasn't official. No rank was given, no vote was held. But one Thursday, Frank said it out loud, and no one disagreed. She's the heart of this place now. The bar didn't cheer. They just nodded, because they already knew Maya hadn't claimed leadership. She'd earned it the way most real leaders do, by showing up over and over without demanding anything in return, without trying to prove herself, without trying to be more than human, just by being there. What happens when veterans stop guarding their wounds and start naming them? Murphy's had changed. The same photos lined the walls. Dusty platoon shots, war zone snapshots frozen in grainy light. But now, new ones joined them. One in particular stood out. Maya, kneeling in a ruined Afghan clinic, blood on her sleeves. Treating a Marine with a makeshift tourniquet. Someone had printed a label below the frame. The quiet medic. Below that, people started leaving things. Challenge coins, unit patches, crumpled handwritten notes. A kind of shrine, not to Maya, but to something she represented. Not glory, not heroism, survival. How does pain teach you to listen differently? Maya sat with the quiet ones, the ones who didn't speak, didn't drink, didn't make eye contact. She knew those silences, knew how loud they could be. She didn't force conversation, just left space, a nod, a glass, a small joke when the time was right. And then, when the dam finally cracked, when the words started to leak out like blood from an old wound, she was there to catch them, gently, without judgment. Can you treat a wound you can't see? Big Jim approached her one night and shoved deep into his jacket like he was carrying something heavy. "My nephew, Tommy," he said. "You talked to him, right?" Maya nodded. "He's been coming to the Tuesday group. Quiet, but open." Jim exhaled. That's the first time he's admitted he needed help since Fallujah. He stared at the floor, chewing the words like gravel. "You gave him permission to say it out loud." Maya's answer was simple. Sometimes all we need is someone who understands without needing the story first. How do you honor pain without becoming it? Maya never told her story unless someone asked, but when they did, she didn't dramatize it, didn't dwell on the blood or the trauma. She focused on the people. The Marine who bled out calling for his mom, the nurse who whispered prayers while they packed shrapnel from a child's leg, the enemy fighter she once tried to save, because death wasn't something she handed out carelessly. "They all matter," she said once, "even the ones we didn't save, especially them." How? Does a place learn to breathe again? Murphy's stopped being just a bar. It became something else, something sacred. Thursday nights turned into informal support groups, laughter mixing with tears, stories pouring out between jukebox songs and second rounds. Maya didn't call it therapy. She wasn't a therapist, but she knew the battlefield. She'd walked it in boots and in dreams, and people trusted her. What happens when the toughest men you know begin to soften? Frank stopped flinching when someone mentioned the Humvee. Tank started hugging his nephew in public. Sarah took off her gloves, letting people see the burn scars she used to hide. "I used to think these were shame," she told Maya. "Now they feel like survival." And Diesel, who once mocked Maya with every coke he slid across the bar, now kept her favorite corner spotless. Even put a sign above her seat, reserved for Doc. No one dared touch it. How do you teach others to carry what almost broke you? One night, a young vet named Ryan arrived. Didn't say a word, just stared at the wall for an hour. Maya sat beside him, quiet, until finally he whispered, "I watched a guy die in a fire. I froze. I should have pulled him out, but I froze." She waited a long moment before speaking. "You didn't freeze," she said. "Your brain chose survival over action. That's not weakness, it's wiring." He looked at her, lost, angry. "Then why does it feel like failure?" Maya didn't answer right away. She just touched the edge of her Coke glass, then looked him in the eye. "Because you're human, and being human in a place built for monsters leaves marks we don't always know how to name." He cried quietly in a room full of veterans who understood, and no one looked away. What happens when healing becomes contagious? Murphy's became a magnet. Veterans who'd stopped going to the VA started showing up. Not for a diagnosis, just for a place to sit and not be alone. And Maya never stopped showing up. Every week, every story, every burden. She absorbed it all and still stood, not untouched, but unbroken, because somewhere along the way, Maya Chun had become more than a medic. She was a mirror, a reminder, a lighthouse for the lost, a quiet leader in a room that had once tried to break her. Now, they followed her without question, not because she raised her voice, but because she never had to. What happens when one quiet woman begins to change an entire town? 6 months ago, Murphy's was just another smoky bar with ghosts in the wood grain and war stories trapped in the wallpaper. Now it was something else, a gravity point, a place where broken men and women came not to forget, but to be remembered. And it wasn't just the veterans anymore. Wives started coming, brothers, mothers of the ones who didn't come home, not to drink, but to listen, to sit quietly beside the people who lived through things they couldn't imagine. And at the center of it all was Maya, not giving speeches, not playing hero, just listening, and somehow that changed everything. How do you rebuild trust in a system that once left you behind? The VA noticed. At first, it was a whisper. Then it was a phone call. A social worker asked to sit in on one of the Thursday night gatherings, not to evaluate, just to observe. Maya didn't say yes immediately. She knew what bureaucracy smelled like, but eventually, she nodded, and that Thursday, a quiet woman with a clipboard and tired eyes took a seat at the back. She didn't take notes. She just listened. Watched the way Tank reached over to stop a vet from spiraling into a panic attack. Saw how Big Jim walked out with a Marine who hadn't spoken in weeks. Saw Maya, calm as a mountain, anchoring the room without ever raising her voice. At the end of the night, the social worker said only one thing. We should have been doing this all along. Can one act of grace echo further than war itself? Word spread, the kind that doesn't need a press release. You want help? Go to Murphy's. Can't sleep. Go to Murphy's. Can't forgive yourself? Go to Murphy's and talk to Doc. Soon, local counselors began sending veterans their way, not as a substitute for therapy, but as a supplement, a place to feel human before they sat in a clinical chair. It wasn't about strategy. It was about belonging. What happens when the healer has to admit her own wounds still bleed? One night, long after the crowd thinned, Maya sat at the bar alone. Diesel was cleaning glasses, humming low. Frank had gone home early. It should have been peaceful, but her hands were trembling, the way they used to on nights when adrenaline wouldn't let her sleep. She didn't notice the tears until they hit the mahogany. Diesel said nothing, just reached below the bar and set down the box, the one with the 5 purple hearts. He didn't open it, just set it near her, like an old friend coming to sit in silence. I see you, Doc, he said quietly, even when you forget who you are. She wiped her eyes and whispered, It's not about medals. Diesel nodded. No. But they remind the rest of us why we follow you. What does real strength look like when no one's watching? There was no schedule, no roster, no rank. But if someone was missing on Thursday, Maya noticed, and if they didn't come the next week, she reached out. Text, call, visit, if needed. Sometimes, that was all it took. Just knowing someone noticed. Other times it wasn't enough. There were still funerals, still folded flags, still silence too heavy to break. But Maya never stopped showing up, even when the grief bruised her ribs, even when the survivor's guilt howled in the night. She stood quietly because she knew showing up was the fight. How far does the impact of quiet leadership reach? One afternoon, a schoolteacher walked in, confused, nervous. She asked to speak to the doc. Maya met her with her usual calm. The woman explained that her class had been studying war, but the kids weren't connecting with it. Too abstract, too distant. I heard this place changed lives, she said, and I thought maybe you'd come talk to them? Maya blinked. Public speaking wasn't her thing, but she nodded because what was the point of surviving if you couldn't pass on the reasons to live? What happens when a child asks the question no adult dares to? The classroom was quiet. Maya stood at the front, not in uniform, just a plain gray sweater and jeans. She told them about field medicine, about teamwork, about fear, about courage that doesn't feel like courage at all, just action in the face of noise. Then a boy raised his hand. Couldn't have been more than 10. If it was so hard, why did you go back? The question pierced deeper than any mortar ever had. Maya smiled, softly, sadly, because someone always needed me. She paused, and I kept hoping someone would be there for me too. The room was still. Then a girl whispered, Weed. be there for you. And Maya felt something shift inside, like a wound that had stopped weeping, even if it still ached. How do you teach the next generation to carry what they didn't cause? She started visiting schools, not to lecture, just to tell stories, human ones. The kids didn't ask about body counts. They asked about bravery, about love, about whether it hurt to say goodbye. And Maya told them the truth, that it always hurt, but the hurt reminded her she'd loved something worth protecting. She showed them photos, not of war, but of smiles, laughter, Marines holding each other up after firefights, the humanity of it, and somehow, that mattered more than any flag. And back at Murphy's, something else changed too. Frank's booth wasn't just his anymore. He started inviting people in. Tank shared his story with a new widow who just lost her brother to PTSD. Sarah opened up about the day she tried to take her own life. And what stopped her? Even Diesel started sitting on the customer side sometimes, listening, laughing, healing. Because healing doesn't always happen in hospitals. Sometimes it happens on a bar stool with a Coke and a quiet woman who refused to walk away. What happens when someone questions everything you've built just because they don't understand it? It started with a clipboard, a crisp suit, government badge, tight handshake. He said his name was Andrews. Sighed he was from Washington. Didn't say more than that. Didn't need to. His shoes were too polished for Murphy's. He walked in on a Thursday night and instantly slowed, eyes scanning the walls, the photo of Maya, the box behind the bar. The conversations dipped, not stopped, just shifted. Veterans knew how to spot a man carrying the wrong kind of authority. Andrews made it to the bar, pulled up a stool, and ordered water. Didn't even look at Diesel. "Where's the woman?" he asked. Diesel didn't blink. "Which one?" "The one they call Doc. What does it feel like to be put on trial, without a courtroom, without a crime?" Maya came forward. She always did. Her presence calmed the room, always had. But this night, her steps felt heavier. She could feel it, that tension before a storm. The eyes that once doubted her now narrowed not at her, but at him. "You're Maya Chun," Andrews said, checking the name off his list. Maya gave a single nod. "I've been reading reports," he said, unofficial. "Gatherings, no certified counselors, no formal VA oversight." He said it like an accusation. "Do you have a license?" "No," Maya said evenly. He raised an eyebrow. "So you're offering therapy without credentials?" "I offer a Coke," she replied, "and I listen." That silenced him, but only for a breath. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that is?" he asked. "Unsupervised emotional environments, traumatized individuals. You could be doing more harm than good. What if your healing space suddenly becomes someone else's battlefield?" The room froze. Maya didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, Frank stood. He didn't shout, didn't clench his fists. He just walked toward the man in the suit and said, "She saved my life twice." Andrews looked confused. "Once in Fallujah?" Frank continued, "When she pulled me out of a burning Humvee, and once here, when she opened that damn box and reminded me who I was." Tank stood next. 3 months ago, I was drinking myself to sleep. Thought no one gave a damn, Maya. Looked me in the eye and said, "We'll hold the line until you can stand again." He paused. I'm still standing. Then Sarah asked me how many therapists I've walked out on. Asked me how many times I almost put a gun in my mouth. She looked Andrews dead in the eye and asked me who stopped me. What does a community look like when it defends one of its own without being asked? More voices rose. Big Jim, Marcus, even Diesel. One by one, they stepped forward. Not in anger, but in testimony. Maya didn't come here to lead, Frank said. She came here to survive, same as the rest of us. He gestured around the room. This place, these people, they're still breathing because of her. Maya stood silent the whole time. Didn't cry, didn't smile. She just watched. Andrews looked like a man suddenly realizing he'd walked into something far bigger than a bar. This isn't authorized. He muttered, "This is a bar, not a program." Maya finally spoke. "Maybe that's the problem," she said. "Can a place without a name still become a sanctuary?" Andrews left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't make threats. Just looked. Confused, he came looking for liability. Found a family. Came looking for control. Found something ungovernable. Not because it was rebellious, but because it was real. What does it mean to be legitimate when the system that questions you has already failed you? The next day, Maya got a letter, VA Regional Office. Official tone, careful language, no threats. But plenty of concerns. She read it twice. Then she placed it in the box beside the medals and let it go. Because she wasn't here for approval. She was here for the ones still carrying their wounds like ticking clocks. And she knew, without any doubt, that what they were building together mattered more than a rubber stamp. How do you measure value when lives are being saved in silence? That Thursday, the turnout was the largest yet. Even veterans who hadn't shown up in years walked through the door. Some brought friends, others brought photos. One man, Korean War, 90 years old, handed Maya his bronze star and said, "Hold this for me. You remind me what I earned it for." No ceremony, no camera crews. Just quiet reverence. What happens when someone tries to erase what you've built, but finds it's already become part of people's souls? Andrews never came back, but his visit did something Maya didn't expect. It made the community stronger, because for the first time, they realized Murphy's wasn't just a bar anymore. It was theirs, and no agency, no badge, no suit from Washington could take that away. And Maya, she stayed steady, unshaken, because she wasn't building a program. She was building a tribe, and tribes, they protect their own. What does it mean to truly come home? Not to a place, but to people who see all of you and stay anyway. It was raining again, soft, rhythmic, the kind of rain that makes the world feel quieter. Inside Murphy's, the same old jukebox hummed. Glasses clinked, laughter flickered like candlelight. Warm, unexpected, real. Maya sat in her usual seat, Coke in hand, the box with 5 medals tucked away beneath the bar like a sacred ember. It had been nearly a year, 1 year since she first walked into the firestorm of judgment, 1 year since the toy soldier was left on her stool, 1 year since she opened the box, and now something felt different, not in her, around her. The air had changed, no longer heavy with proof and pain. Now it held something else. Acceptance, peace, maybe even joy. How do you know when the war inside you is finally quiet? A young woman stood in the doorway, dripping wet, too clean to be local, boots too tight, eyes scanning. Maya knew that look. Everyone did. She stood slowly, quietly, as if drawn by instinct. The girl flinched slightly when Maya approached. "Name?" Maya asked gently. The girl hesitated. Then, "Private Elena. Just got discharged. You from around here?" "No, just passing through." Maya gestured to the bar. "Then this is where you pause. How many lives start over in places no one planned to end up?" Elena took a seat. Didn't order anything. Didn't speak for a long time. Maya didn't push. She never did. Finally, Elena whispered, "They told me I was too soft for combat, too quiet, that I didn't belong." Across the bar, Tank chuckled without looking up. "Sounds familiar." Elena blinked. "You too?" Sarah raised her glass. "Every damn day," Frank smiled. Lines on his face folding like old maps. The quiet ones usually carry the most weight. And Elena? She smiled for the first time. Just a little, but it stayed. What happens when someone new takes their first breath? Because you held space for them to exhale. Hours passed. Stories flowed. Not all from Maya. In fact, she barely spoke that night. Because she didn't need to. Others had learned. They'd watched her, followed her, become her echoes, and now they were the ones leaning forward, offering calm. Nods, holding silence like it was sacred. Elena looked around. Something in her softened. "Is this a program?" she asked. Maya shook her head. "It's a place," she paused, "for people who still carry pieces of somewhere else inside them. When does leadership become legacy?" Later that night, after most had left, Elena approached Maya at the bar. "I don't think I belong anywhere." Maya sipped her Coke, thought for a long time, then said, "Neither did I, until I stopped trying to fit and started building a place worth belonging to." Elena blinked, then she smiled. Not the shy smile from before, a real one. And Maya saw it then, the ripple. This wasn't just about her anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Murphy's had grown into something beyond any one person, because she had chosen to stay. What is a home, if not the place that welcomes every version of you and never asks you to apologize for surviving? That night, Maya did something she hadn't done in months. She opened the box, set the medals on the bar. One by one, not for validation, not for remembrance, just for truth. Each purple heart glinted under the light, and Elena stared, wide-eyed. "You got 5? Maya nodded. "Then why don't you ever talk about them?" Maya looked at the medals, then at Elena. "Because I was never trying to be remembered." She smiled gently. "I was just trying not to disappear." How do you honor a story that was never about heroism, but about endurance? The bar grew quiet. Diesel turned down the music. Tank set his glass aside. Frank stood again. Everyone knew what was happening. Elena stepped back. Maya reached into her pocket, pulled out a small patch cloth, frayed at the edges. She placed it. In Elena's hand it read, "We hold the line. No explanation, none needed." And Elena? She didn't cry, not yet, but her hands trembled the way Maya's once had, like something inside her was being rebuilt, slowly, painfully, beautifully. And Maya? She leaned back on the bar, eyes closed, breath calm, because finally, she didn't need to fight for her place, didn't need to explain, didn't need to carry it all, not alone. The room carried it with her now, and in the quiet. She smiled. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts, and sometimes the quietest soldier in the room becomes the one who saves everyone else without firing a shot, without raising her voice, just by staying, just by listening, just by being.